Every little thing you think that you need. Every little thing you think that you need. Every little thing that's just feeding your greed. Oh, I bet that you'd be fine without it.
Hey everybody, just a couple quick notes before we get started. What you're about to hear is an attenuated conversation between me and Ryan. We talked about unpleasant experiences. We had to cut the first half of that conversation off because we got pretty deep into some personal experiences that we aren't able to air, at least for now. So maybe we'll save that for the vault one day. But we answered a bunch of questions about unpleasant experiences, talked about our unpleasant experiences, and talked about other people's unpleasant experiences as well. I hope you find a lot of value in that conversation. Also, Ryan and I are hitting the road for the Less Is Now tour, and this week we are finally announcing the first leg of that tour. It's 19 different cities. So here's what's going to happen. Ryan and I are going to hit the road. We're going to give an in-depth talk about minimalism, and we're going to record a live version of the Minimalists podcast. And also, of course, we're going to dish out hugs afterwards and answer all of your questions in person. So the 19 cities we're coming to for this first leg of the tour: Pittsburgh, Burlington, Boston, Portland, Maine, Missoula, Spokane, Seattle, Portland, Oregon, Grand Rapids, Chicago, Madison, Minneapolis, San Diego, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Indianapolis, Cincinnati, Columbus, and Cleveland. But we're also announcing more cities as well. You can get the pre-sale tickets. Now, when I say pre-sale tickets, what does that mean? Well, pre-sale tickets go on sale March 8th. That's Wednesday, March 8th. That's tomorrow, the day after this podcast goes out, at noon Eastern time. That means that our audience gets access to the best seats in the house before any of the venues make the tickets available to the general public. But the pre-sale window is only 36 hours, and you have to use the pre-sale code MINIMAL if you're interested in getting those tickets. Tickets go on sale to the general public starting March 10th at noon Eastern. And also, we're adding some other cities as well. You can find a growing list of cities on our tour page, theminimalists.com/tour. We hope to see you really soon. I hope you enjoy this presentation of unpleasant experiences with the Minimalists. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Minimalist Podcast. I am Joshua Fields Milburn.
And I'm Ryan Nicodemus, and together we are the Minimalists.
So Ryan and I just had a long conversation about a unpleasant experience that I had that may or may not make this actual podcast. We have a bunch of questions from different readers, so even if that conversation doesn't end up airing, we have a lot of questions and a lot of answers. We reached out for some questions here on social media.
About unpleasant experiences.
Yeah, about basically it's like, hey, we're going to record a podcast about unpleasant experiences. What would you like to ask the Minimalist? So Ryan, maybe you and I can talk about some of these. And I won't list names because some of these are fairly similar, or some of them seem like they're fairly personal questions and they may not want their full name on the air. But we're still on the air, right? I know if technically it's going over Wi-Fi. That's on air, right? All right, my question for the Minimalist: has there been something you have removed from your life that you regret? That I could see how that would definitely be unpleasant, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So us going through an unpleasant experience of feeling like, oh, I've removed something that I regret. I can say for me, there's nothing I've removed from my life that I regret removing. But I can talk about some regrets of my own. One is my biggest relationship regret had nothing to do with stuff, obviously, although in an indirect way, I guess it kind of did.
Sure.
Was when my mom was dying. I didn't spend enough time with her. I mean, her and I had a rocky relationship. A lot of people know this who read Everything That Remains. You know, the relationship her and I had while I was growing up. My mom was an alcoholic, and obviously that strained our relationship a lot. So by the time I reached my 20s and I started just working in the corporate world, I certainly neglected that relationship, but it's because I had walked away from that relationship. And when I walked back to it was, when I found out she had stage 4 lung cancer, and if I had to do that over again, I would have taken that last year when she knew she was dying to quit my job, moved down to Florida, St. Pete, where she was living at the time, and I would have spent that year with her. Instead, I spent a lot of time for the corporate world. I spent like 7 weeks down there over the course of those 9 months that she was going through her chemo and radiation. But man, it was not enough time. And I still have bad dreams about it, and she still shows up in dreams. And like, I wish I would have done a better job of managing that time. And the other regrets that I tend to have, much more minor than that, tends to be for not doing something sooner. Like, sometimes I wish I would have gotten rid of something, or wish I would have exited a relationship sooner, or wish I would have walked away from my corporate career sooner. I wish I would have done something. So the regret, it is actually a driver for me to take action in many ways. The potential, in my novel, there's the main character. His name's Jody Grafton. He has a tattoo on his arm that says "Future Regrets," and to me that meant this it's at least a double entendre, right? There is the side where he's like, I'm doing a bunch of stupid stuff now, I'm going to regret this later. But there's this other positive side where it's like, if I don't take action, if I don't make this change, I'm going to regret not doing this later. And so it's supposed to mean sort of both simultaneously. I'm going to regret doing the stupid stuff that I'm doing and being unproductive with my time, or I'm going to regret not doing something, not making this change, not walking toward the direction I want to walk. So I know that one's a bit more vague, but I guess what I'm saying here is I use regret quite often to fuel the changes I want to make in my life.
I was going to say, if I died with no regrets, I think I'd really regret that.
Yeah, isn't that funny, man? Like, and so maybe the regret thing is, it can be a catalyst in many respects. But no, there's never been something that I've gotten rid of that I've truly regretted. There's been a pang of regret. I wouldn't even call it regret, where I've gotten rid of maybe a shirt or something a long time ago, where I'm like, oh, where's that shirt that I was going to wear this one today? Oh, it's gone. Oh, well, I'll wear another shirt. Like, when you start treating the items like tools and use them for their utility, it's hard to really regret that thing, right? Does that make sense?
No, it really does. I'm trying to think. Like, I had some opportunities to grab some of my grandfather's stuff when he passed away about 5 years ago, and I don't regret not taking any of it. Like, I don't ever think like, man, like my dad and my aunts and stuff, like they've all got a piece of clothing and it still smells like them, and like, to me, that's just like not letting go. But I mean, for me, not for them. Yeah, I'm just saying, like, that's how it would feel to me. Like, I don't judge them for it, but yeah,
you wanted to be able to let go, and your ability to let go was also letting go of his stuff. Yeah,
and I'll tell you, I totally agree with you when it comes to physical things and having regrets on not doing things sooner. And what I mean by that is,
do you have any like concrete examples?
Yeah, I was just getting ready to use one. Great. Before you interrupted me.
I was trying to have a conversation with you. Just kidding, you, man. And your monologues here.
You can just get out of the room for a second, Josh. I got about 15 minutes. No.
Let me talk about all my regrets.
No, 3 years ago, when, like the first year we left the corporate world, it was like, we made like 20-something thousand bucks. Yeah. So I had like no money to do anything except sleep on people's floors, and we had money for gas and stuff, like, to get us from point A to point B.
Well, you're saying when we went on tour, you weren't homeless.
Right. Yeah, sorry. When we went on tour, that's right. I got to remember, like, everyone listening to this, it's maybe their first podcast they're listening to. Yeah. So yes, that's exactly what I meant. And I remember like snowboarding, and the gear that I had, like the snow pants I had were torn, and like just they had lost their waterproof, whatever was on there. My jacket was not waterproof. So like on the days where it was, wet, heavy snow, I mean, I would just be drenched, and it was miserable. But I loved snowboarding so much. Like I'd just like push through it,
Yeah. Because the other option was not doing it at all.
Right, exactly. Well, then, fast forward a couple of years where it's like, okay, great. Like, we started to get some traction. And we're like, holy cow, like I'm not just beholden to like, living off of this like really small budget. All of a sudden I was like, oh wow, like I can afford some new snow pants and a new jacket.
Yeah.
And I remember going through like the first season that I felt that I went through that entire season without getting new stuff because I was like, no, I don't need it. Like this stuff still works, but it was unpleasant.
Yes.
And like there was a certain point where I was like, I'm not doing this anymore.
Yeah.
Like I am depriving myself for the sake of just depriving myself. Like there was no other reason for it. It was me being stubborn, and it was like, no, I'm a minimalist. I'm not going to buy a new snowboard, even though I can, I could probably afford that now.
I think that's good for like the Stoics talk about, living without for a period of time so that you can sort of reground yourself. And they'll often talk about how bringing things into your life has more to do with removing unpleasant situations than new things aren't going to make you happy. If I buy you personally a Rolex watch right now, expensive, they're like $3,000 stainless steel watch.
Oh my God, did you get me a Rolex? Is that what is in that box over there?
It's not going to make you happy, right?
No.
Because it's not solving a problem that is already unpleasant, that's making you miserable in some way.
Right.
It's not fixing. Now, there are some people, there are a very small sliver. Do you know the whole Rolex story, why they became like popular amongst certain people? Yeah. So
No.
it's a great, apparently was, I don't know if it's still the best diving watch in the world, but at one point it was,
Oh, wow.
the Rolex was the best diving watch in the world. Like I think it was maybe back in the 60s, and I could be wrong on the time frame there.
Interesting.
But the point being 50s, 60s, whenever, and these rich guys would go, down to Turks and Caicos for the weekend and do some crazy diving, and then some of them would just like wear their Rolex on Monday, and people would be like, what is, it's clearly, it was just a stainless steel watch, but it was a status symbol, like, oh yes, I go diving on the weekends, clearly.
Interesting.
But it truly did add value to their lives because it survived farther under the water than any other watch at the time, and so it actually served an important purpose. And so there are some people where that would, and maybe in some weird world, even save their life. A Rolex saved my life, kind of thing.
No, seriously, like you're keeping track of time when your air is going to run out. No, absolutely. Like time is important when you're diving.
But then, of course, it became a status. It became a status symbol, and they added diamonds and gold bezels and all of these other things that were not the initial intention of this really well-crafted watch that did cost a lot of money because it performed a very specific function. And my point being is that while there is a small segment that would get huge benefit from that, it's not solving any kind of problem for you. But in your case, these snow pants or jacket actually kept you from experiencing an unpleasantness that was unnecessary because you could afford to remove that unpleasantness. And therefore, in a way, the stuff in that case would make you happier, not by the virtue of the stuff, but by removing the unpleasant experience of an otherwise positive experience in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess that's what where I'm coming from with, like, yes, I have put myself through unpleasant experiences just to make sure that it truly was unpleasant. Like when I've got this case for my phone that's a battery, and I remember when we went on that tour.
You see that tour like we haven't been on 6.
The tour I was talking about earlier, when that first year when we left the corporate world after that, my phone was like dying left and right. In the car, it was okay with GPS, but when we were in cities, especially like Portland, for some reason, like Verizon just doesn't work awesome in Portland, so it's like constantly draining the battery. And then when we would be walking around Portland with the GPS, like it would die quickly.
Right.
So like there was a point where I was like, okay, this is miserable. I need to get that freaking battery for my case. So if there's an emergency, someone needs to call me, they can. And B, when my phone dies, and if you weren't with me and didn't have your phone, then like I'm screwed.
Yeah, you were solving a problem.
Right. Exactly. But I guess what I'm saying is like, yeah, I certainly have kept myself in unpleasant situations just to be sure that they were unpleasant. Because I think sometimes, going back to the difference between discomfort and unpleasant. Sometimes it's just uncomfortable, and that's okay.
Yeah, and so in case we don't air that first segment of this, let's just go back and talk about that real quick. Discomfort and unpleasant. We're trying to delineate between the two, and realize that discomfort, at least for the way we're using our nomenclature here, is discomfort leads toward growth. Unpleasant experiences don't necessarily have a positive outcome or neutral at best.
Right.
Which actually would mean they're not neutral. If it's unpleasant and the outcome is neutral, then it's an unnecessary. So maybe the word to use here, Ryan, is
unnecessary.
Yeah. So unpleasant equals unnecessary. Discomfort is necessary for growth. Putting yourself in an uncomfortable situation is the place from which you grow the most, whether you're going to the gym and physically growing, you're working on a creative endeavor and you're growing there, you're growing spiritually, mentally, through meditation. These are often discomfort situations. They're situations that are uncomfortable for many of us, but they produce a necessary, positive outcome. Much of the time, not always, but much of the time, they lead to a positive outcome. So the discomfort is necessary. The negative or neutral result from a unpleasant experience is unnecessary. We can remove the unpleasant, and then instead it's like when we work toward having better problems. It means trying to make ourselves uncomfortable as opposed to making ourselves experience an unpleasant experience or situation.
I see what you're saying there. I do think, though, that sometimes I think an unpleasant experience, it may be unpleasant for us, but for someone else, it is helping them grow, if that makes any sense.
Then I would just recategorize that and say that that is moving toward discomfort then. Because if there's a positive outcome, then I would say that is discomfort. And then the question is, how do we take a look at the unpleasant experiences we have that are unnecessary, and how do we turn that into growth? Because if you can turn it into growth, it turns unpleasant to discomfort.
It would be like if Bex came to you and said, "Hey, I want to have another kid."
Yeah.
And like you did it just, to put yourself through the unpleasant, even though she may be growing.
Right.
Like it's still I guess it's still it's a net negative, I guess, is what it would come out to be.
Right. For me.
Yeah, for you.
Yeah, and I think that's important to know is that has more to do with aligning your values and your beliefs, and that in that case, our values and beliefs would be those are mutually exclusive, right? Those are binary choices: either having a kid or not having a kid, getting married or not getting married. These are binary choices. Living in the northern hemisphere or the southern hemisphere, right? These are binary choices that you can do one or the other. You can't really do both at the same time, and so that's a completely different discussion situation. But I guess what I'm saying here is there are other choices that we make that are unnecessary.
Sure.
And because they're unnecessary, they cause that discomfort, which leads to anxiety, and then ultimately leads to misery and despair. And despair means that you don't. There is no hope in the future, right? It's the opposite of hope, in fact. And so regret, to get back to this person's question here, regret has to do with looking at the past. Despair has to do with looking at the future. And so future regrets is really just despair in many ways. And I think we can turn the key here then is to turn that despair into action so we don't experience it in the future. That despair is a good thing. It says, I see enough pain in my future that I have to make a change right now. Otherwise, it's going to be so unpleasant that I'm not going to live my most ideal life. I'm not going to be my most ideal self.
Right.
Whatever that may be. All right, let's move on to another question here. What happens when you go too far and you accidentally get rid of something that was precious to your wife, but you thought...
Hypothetically speaking.
Well, actually, this is fun. But you thought it was junk. Do you go out and dumpster dive in the thrift shops, or just get used to sleep on the couch? # asking for a friend. Well, I mean, so a few words that stood out to me there, Ryan. The first one is precious. I think if something is too precious, you're probably holding on to it too tightly.
Yeah. I don't know.
And I think about that. But if you're talking about someone else, I can't tell that other person that I think that's too precious, so you need to get rid of it. And therefore, I'm going to get rid of it for you. So I know for me, if anything is too precious to me, I'm holding on to it too tightly. And the only solution to that isn't to let it go, is to loosen my grip. Loosen that grip a little bit and see if it's still serving a purpose. Is it bringing you joy still? And if so, great. But if it's just precious for the sake of being precious, it may mean that you're clinging too tightly and you're leaving claw marks on that thing. But again, that's for your own stuff. The other part is you can't get rid of other people's stuff. That's just wrong.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I would never, whether I thought it was junk or not, I would never get rid of someone else's,
without asking.
stuff. Yeah.
Without asking.
So I would say, A, learn from this mistake. Don't ever get rid of anything that's not yours.
It's actually, I mean, it's, in a weird way, it's theft, right? I mean, you're taking someone, and even if you so if I broke into a jewelry store today and stole a diamond necklace and then threw it out or donated it to Goodwill, I would get arrested for that.
Right.
I'm not saying you did the same thing, and obviously your intentions were much better than that, but the road to discontent is paved with good intentions.
Yeah. I'm going to take this a step further and say that it's not just precious, but let's say it was worth millions, right?
Uh-huh.
And they were like, that was my retirement.
Right.
Like that piece of junk that you just threw away was worth $2 million. Well, what would you do at that point?
Ooh, yeah.
You're going to go dumpster diving.
Absolutely.
You're going to go to the thrift shops.
Yeah.
So I would... And not only because it's worth monetary that much, but if it was your retirement, I'm going to do my best to get that back for you.
Sure.
So
if you screwed up, you have to right the situation.
Right. So and for me to just throw my hands in the air and be like, "Oh, sorry, I thought it was junk." That's not showing support from, in my opinion, that's not showing support.
Yeah, you're not understanding them. You're I mean, so we go through those 4 steps, the TARA. You're not even tolerating them, right? If you're getting rid of someone else's stuff without asking them, man, that is a real jerk move. Yeah. And I get it. I understand why you would want to do that, because I would have that same desire to I don't see any value from this, so I should get rid of it. But guess what? When you're living with someone else, you have to deal with things together. And Bex, Ella, and I have been playing the 30-day minimalism game this month.
I love how it started off with Bex playing, and then it was Bex and you, and now it's Bex, you, and Ella. Or maybe it did alternate into 3 of you.
Well, the intention...
it's great, man.
It was Bex's idea to do it. So we have a minimalist house. You can see a house tour at theminimalists.com/Milburn, and you can see all of our stuff. We don't have a lot of stuff, but the point is, can you still start to question the things? And so at her...
Even when you think you have everything perfectly curated.
Yes.
Yeah. I will... you guys doing it has inspired Mariah to do it.
Really?
Yeah, and I don't think I have 500 things to get rid of.
I know,
Seriously,
right? You might end up being naked at the end of the month or something.
But she was like, well, if you and I do it together, and I'm like, okay, I'll support you.
Right.
I'll get rid of the things I can, but I don't have 500 things. But yeah, going into it as a team is definitely. But yeah, no, thanks for the encouragement though, man. Because
I'm glad.
I feel like we have a very tidy house, but I mean, yeah, if it was my house, we would have a lot less.
You'd have fewer shoes, but you're not going to get rid of. You're not going to go in and get rid of
I look
Mariah's
horrible
shoes.
in stilettos. I don't think Mariah has one pair of stilettos. But
I remember that we did this charity race, and you had to wear. We all wore stilettos in that. It was called Run a Mile in her shoes. And oh my, I
who won that race?
I think
who won that race?
You came in second.
Hey, in the finals, I came in second.
I will have you know that you almost won. You were the first loser, Ryan.
Thanks.
But no, you ran so fast in stilettos. I can't run as fast.
The key is high knees. High knees.
Okay.
That's it, man.
Yeah, dude, you were just, I mean, I can't run as fast as you were running if I'm wearing regular shoes and you were wearing stiletto. I think I broke both my ankles that day. Like I rolled both of my ankles trying to run in those things.
I remember you. You just dropped. You didn't even finish your race, did you?
I didn't even finish the first lap.
I was like,
I rolled both of my ankles in the first lap.
Dude.
Yeah. So we were.
And I ended up with. I don't know if you remember that huge blister I had.
Oh yeah.
Like there were medics there, and I had after that final. And that's the only reason I didn't win that final race is because I was like, okay, I'm severely injuring myself right now.
Yeah.
But like they had to
it was for good cause. We weren't just running in stilettos.
It was for charity. But I went to the ambulance and they like wrapped my foot up and stuff. Like it was the blister. Oh my, it was the worst blister I've ever had in my life.
So anyway, back to that. You wouldn't just get rid of Mariah's shoes, obviously, because I don't think these look good on you.
We're playing the men's game. Well, we're in it together. I'll just get rid of some of her stuff. Yeah,
that's a bad plan. Instead, what you would do is you would encourage. And you do that through showing, and I think playing it together. So you can go to Bex's Instagram account. It's just @minimalwellness, and each day she's posting the photo of the stuff we've been getting rid of this month. And what I've found encouraging from that whole thing is you will continue to curate, right? And by setting that example, you're able to really start to question the stuff that you thought was valuable to you. And you're doing it together. And what happens when you do something together? You get their buy-in. So to this guy, obviously don't do that again. Yes, you have to find a way to make it right. And if you can't find this item and it was a precious item that is irreplaceable, you're still going to have to find a way to make it right. And no, making you sleep on the couch is not the right answer either. That's a weird way to handle things, but understandable. This person's understandably discontented by your actions. And so, yes, you're going to want to figure out how can I make this right, and then how can I keep this from happening again in the future. So this is an opportunity for you you're having an unpleasant experience now. There's no doubt about that. But from this, it's an opportunity for you to grow together and say, I'm going to better understand your needs. I'm going to better understand you as a person, as an individual, and how that helps our overall relationship. It helps us together.
Next question.
All right, here's an interesting one. Does becoming a minimalist change your perspective on unpleasant experiences to better prepare you to deal and cope with those situations, either physically, mentally, or financially? I was talking to a friend, Ryan, this weekend while I was making a long drive, and he's middle class, makes good money, and he's tethered to a particular lifestyle, though, right? And so he's tethered to making this income. And while he has an adequate amount of...
Is it just his lifestyle, or is it his family's lifestyle as well?
It's both, and I think they're all on the same page. He and his spouse and their kids.
Yeah, there's a lot more to consider when you got a spouse and kids.
There absolutely is.
Because you're not just changing your lifestyle, you're changing other people's. But yeah, keep going.
And so it's even more... In fact... I was at a museum this weekend, and a gal walks up to me and said, "Hey, you're one of the minimalist guys, right?" And I said, "Yes." She goes, "I see that you have a kid now, and you didn't have one in the movie. So is it more difficult to be a minimalist now you have a kid?" And I just looked at her and I said, "It's more important now that I have other people relying on me, that I live more intentionally."
Yeah.
And you could see the look on her face, and she had like 3 kids with her and her husband. And she's like, "Oh, wow. Like, okay, now that was like the first time she got it. Like, she saw the documentary and kind of got it. But like when I said it's more important when you have other people relying on you, she was like, "Oh, like it isn't just about me." Right. And so dealing with unpleasant experiences, so you a moment ago you talked about when we walked away from the corporate world. Yeah, I remember making $23,000 that year, which is not the poverty line, but it's relatively close. It's certainly not a lot of money.
What is poverty? 18,000 for
I think
a single person?
I think it's 18. Yeah,
okay,
18 is some change, and it may be slightly higher than that now with inflation, but around then it was about 18,000. And so it was just above that. But I also remember growing up poor, my mom made less than $20,000 a year. And I remember being very discontented there and being even more discontented making good money in the corporate world because I was making bad decisions with the finances that I did have. But I was telling my friend this weekend I was on the phone with, and he makes probably six figures a year. So he's like upper middle class, right?
Sure.
And has a decent sized family. And he was talking about like being tethered to that lifestyle. And to me, that's where I was in my 20s, where I was part of the discontent was I was tethered to having to make that kind of, because I don't think there's anything wrong with making money even now. It's the habits that we have allow us to better focus the money that whatever we bring in, whether it's $23,000 or if someone were to show up tomorrow with $1 million donation at the minimalists.com/donate.
We just need to fool one person and we'll be set.
But yeah, I mean, if somehow, obviously you and I aren't millionaires, but if somehow someone were to show up with $1 million, we'd have the ability to spend that money better than we would have in the corporate world.
Yeah.
And we exhibit that through our everyday actions now. Who was it who said to me early on, like, if you're not contributing making $30,000 a year, what makes you think you're going to contribute making $300,000 a year or $3 million a year?
Doubt.
And now, is your ability to contribute greater when you're making more money? Of course. If your needs are met, of course your ability is greater. In fact, your duty is greater. And I'm not saying any governing body needs to dictate that you need to give this much money. It's much better that you have that option, that choice to do that. And so minimalism has allowed me to be more deliberate with whatever resources I have, whether they're plentiful or they are scarce. If they're scarce resources, I'm still able to be more deliberate. And so I was telling my friend this week, and we were talking on the phone, I felt more financially free at age 30 making $23,000 a year than I did at age 28 making 10 times that almost, 9 times that or whatever it may have been. I felt more free being close to the poverty line because my decisions and my habits were so much better. And then, of course, once I started making more money than that, I felt even more financially free because I had set up the habits that allowed me to continue to question those resources I was bringing them in and allocate them in a more deliberate way. So
I forget the question we're answering.
Well, it's about unpleasant experiences, and does minimalism let you handle those unpleasant experiences in a better way?
Yeah, I think for me, I am able to avoid more unpleasant experiences now. Meaning, like, if I throw myself into an unpleasant experience, there is some kind of net positive coming out of it.
Yeah. So once again, and we just have to use the right definitions here for this conversation. Is that what you're able to do is you're able to avoid unpleasant experiences and really lean into those uncomfortable experiences.
Yeah, I think I understand what you're saying.
You're really not buying into this here.
No, I just no.
Which is weird because you totally were bought in when we were first talking about it.
No, I'm trying to understand what you just said. It's not that I'm not bought in. I'm calculating or like trying to comprehend.
Well, the unpleasant experience being one without any type of positive outcome. It's unnecessary. Unpleasant experiences are unnecessary. The uncomfortable experiences are necessary.
Yeah.
We're not going to live a life that is... We're not going to nerf the world and have Uber deliver all of our food and be stuck in a virtual reality 24 hours a day. That would be a life void of uncomfortable situations, right?
I would argue that's a life full of no experiences.
Exactly. and
you're not
so,
having experiences yet.
Yeah, and so it would be pacification. Right?
Yeah.
You'd have this infantile experience where everyone is taking care of your every need, but you're not going to feel any kind of growth from that.
So maybe a better way said is I'm able to decipher better between unpleasant and uncomfortable situations.
Right.
Yeah.
Because you are embarking on discomfort out of necessity, whereas before...
Yeah, so no, what I'm trying to decipher, the reason why I'm getting stilted here is because... I think that like an unpleasant or an uncomfortable situation is going to the gym. Okay?
Right.
It's uncomfortable.
Right.
But I would posit that the hour or the hour and a half that I spend at the gym, it's unpleasant. But what makes it uncomfortable versus unpleasant is that, yes, there is some growth coming out of it.
Yeah, we're just using different terms then. We're getting bogged down in the vernacular of it. What I'm saying,
So you could
what I'm saying is, by definition, that's not unpleasant.
Okay, so what about you spend a week somewhere, it's unpleasant. Let's say that, I don't know, dude, we got hired to go to Mars to talk about minimalism.
Okay.
And we've got to spend 6 months on this unpleasant journey to get to Mars for this.
I would argue by definition it's not unpleasant.
Okay.
And I think that's the difference is an unpleasant experience is an unnecessary experience. And the only reason I'm differentiating between the two is I want to lead people, try to help lead people and myself down a path of embracing discomfort.
Yeah.
Lean into that discomfort.
Mm-hmm.
Treat discomfort as a positive choice that allows you to grow. And the only way to determine whether or not something is uncomfortable or it is unpleasant is to look at what is my potential outcome, not as what is the definitive outcome. Because here's the other thing: you could have an uncomfortable situation that actually doesn't end up getting you the outcome you want.
Maybe it even gives you a net negative.
Right.
But you were willing to take the risk.
Exactly.
I'm with you.
Because it had the potential for a positive growth experience.
Yeah. So again, to answer that question about does it make it easier to go into unpleasant experiences? I guess, I stick by the answer of minimalism has helped me to avoid as many unpleasant or unnecessary. I'm going to start saying unnecessary instead of unpleasant.
Okay. Yeah.
It has helped me avoid many unnecessary experiences.
Yeah, and I think that's a good way to put it.
So it's not that I embrace them more. I have fewer experiences like that.
Yeah, so the only thing I would add to that is, to me, unpleasant situations, things that remain constantly unpleasant, become unnecessary. Now, minimalism allows me to identify that much more quickly as well. No, it's not necessary that I work at a cubicle 9 to 5 every day anymore, right? It's no longer necessary for me to do that because I've changed my habits, I've changed my lifestyle, I've changed my needs, I've changed my wants, I've changed my desires, so that is no longer necessary. Whereas before, it was unnecessary, but it was a choice that I was making, and so I was constantly faced with this unpleasant situation.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to a couple more questions here. Here's one that's also about regret, Ryan, and so I think that'll be a good question to piggyback on that first question. How can I get over the regret of bad decisions I've made that have led to bad experiences? So let me just say that I think that regret we need to differentiate here between regret and suffering. So I think regret can be a good thing if it inspires action, like we were talking about earlier, right? I think it's a bad thing to suffer long term. There's always going to be some sort of suffering. I think of what Tony Robbins talks about. He lets himself suffer for 90 seconds so that he can feel, the sort of regret from a situation, but then actually do something about it. Like, suffering in perpetuity is not productive. Short-term suffering, feeling regret, that is, can be productive. So there are situations where I'm like, oh, I shouldn't have done that.
Yeah, let's talk about actual regrets we've had.
Okay.
I regret in 2014 not doing better on the venues. I really regret that.
I look back and I think
people
who don't know who we are, what do you mean by that?
Hi, I'm Ryan.
Uh-huh.
And this is Joshua Fields Milburn, and together we are the Minimalists.
Oh, we've already done that.
I forgot.
So in 2014, what happened?
So 2014, the 100 city book tour that we went on, it was way bigger than what we had anticipated. It started to grow, way bigger than what we had anticipated.
Yeah.
And I think about, probably the worst experience we provided for our readers was the Indianapolis venue.
Yes.
We had probably 500 people show up.
Yeah,
400, whatever.
Yeah.
Hundreds of people.
Yeah.
Our venue held 70. It was in the basement. It was one of the most dampest basements I've ever. It was, great bookstore, great independent shop, but it was just not a great venue, especially for the people that showed up.
It was like the manifestation of a fire hazard too.
Yes. Oh yeah. It was horrible.
It was raining like crazy.
People were getting, soaking wet, waiting on us. And, there were some people legitimately angry.
Yeah.
sending us emails. So, and it's not like I regret making those people mad. I just regret not providing a great experience. And we had several venues where we had hundreds of people show up and we had to turn down we had to send hundreds of people home.
Yeah.
And I really regret that.
Yeah.
Now, I don't lose sleep over it because every single time we've had an event after that,
right,
we've been able to plan well and make sure we had a good venue and everyone's welcome, or we're very clear on, hey, here's how many seats are available. Mm-hmm. If you don't have one of these tickets, well, then, you could show up. Maybe there's going to be a seat for you. But we're better at setting expectations. We're better at setting up the venues.
We learned from that 100-city experience a lot, man. I mean,
So and that's really what I'm getting at is like, how do you avoid feeling the regret of the past? Is you stop repeating the past.
Yes.
And you learn from those regrets.
Because imagine if we were because we're going to do a tour again this year, the Less Is Now tour. And can you imagine if we took the same exact approach we took 3 years ago? We'd get the same result. And in fact, it'd even be worse because we have a larger audience now. So it'd be even worse result if you keep doing the same thing. It's not that you keep getting the same result. You'll get a worse result because you're wasting your time at some point.
Yeah. But sitting there and holding on to, like, let's say, oh, I regret that. I cheated on my girlfriend at 22 years old. This didn't happen. Well, maybe this did happen actually. But anyway, I look back and I'm like, oh, I cheated on my girlfriend at 22 years old. And man, that was a really good relationship. And God, where would we be right now if I hadn't cheated on her? And, what amazing life would I have? Like that is useless rumination, first off. But the second thing is like, now, I would approach my life like, okay, I know how bad it feels when I make someone, when I cheat on someone and make them feel like that. Oh, and by the way, I don't want to ruin relationships like that anymore. It's learning from that experience. But if I was to repeat that at age 35 now, well, I'm doing it to myself at that point.
Sure. Yeah. So maybe what you're saying there, you talk about like the endless ruminations, the what ifs. What if I wouldn't have done that, and what if I would have done this instead? Instead of dwelling on the what ifs, what if we start to dwell on the what now?
Yeah.
And okay, that did happen, and I can't get caught up in the what ifs because it's an infinite tree that will lead to a million different potential outcomes. But what now? Yeah. What are the outcomes now that I can learn from that? So back to the tour thing, we every year since then we've planned better. We did a smaller tour in 2015, the word tasting tour, and we tried some new stuff, knowing that we would fail on that tour because we wanted to try and introduce some new authors and stuff. But that was okay. We went into it with that expectation. Let's learn some stuff from this. And then last year, 2016, we did the tour with our documentary, which really was much better planned than previous tours. But even then, we had some sound system issues that we learned from, and just some different venue interact. When you're dealing with these bigger venues, you learn about setting the right expectations with them. And so when we're doing tour stops this year, what we're not going to have a perfect tour, but we will take the learnings that we have from previous years and use them to our benefit going forward.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the best way to get over regrets is stop repeating the same regrets.
Yeah, because otherwise you're going to stay stuck in that cycle.
Yeah.
All right, here, what's next? All right, so this question says, how do you deal when people say / criticize that minimalism is just for rich white people? How do you make your work more inclusive and intersectional?
I got to be honest, like we'll talk about this, but I'm so sick of addressing this question.
Yeah.
I'm sick of it. I was thinking about it earlier today, and it's like, hey, let me go ahead and stereotype you and cut out a whole group of people just so I can feel better about myself.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I am so tired. To say that minimalism doesn't work for you, that's fine.
Yeah, totally.
But to say, well, it doesn't work for this whole group. Minimalism doesn't work for poor people. Bullshit.
Yeah.
Maybe it doesn't work for you. And maybe it's harder for you because, you can look at us and say, oh, well, these guys were poor, then they were rich. They've had they've been on both sides of the spectrum, so it's easier for them to understand. That's acceptable to me.
Uh-huh.
But to sit there and say, oh, it doesn't work for me because I'm poor, it's an excuse.
Yeah.
And it pisses me off. Like every time I hear that question, it is it's a stereotype, and it's never, can't think of one. I mean, we, to survive, like we got to be able to look at a snake and say, oh shit, that might be poisonous.
Right.
So there are stereotypes that we have to do to survive. But this stereotype is not survival. It's an excuse. And I am so sick of addressing that question.
Yeah.
Anyone who thinks that out there is, you're being prejudiced against poor people.
Yeah.
It really frustrates me.
Well, it reminds me of this. So we get emails like this, if not daily, weekly. I mean, similar emails, but this one just came in. I'll change the person's name. We'll just call him Christopher. He says, "Hello, my name is Christopher Smith. Forgive me for the grammar. I am currently a homeless veteran who literally has lost it. All my friends, lifestyle, job, loved ones, and quite literally my mind. Of course, I'm in debt, but until I watched your movie, I've been on a hopeless downhill spiral of self-pity and drug use. I'm so new at all this stuff. It's quite hard, but it's rewarding. I just want to tell you guys that you saved my life." Now, what I would say here is we didn't save his life. Maybe this message helped
Sure.
turn things around. I don't want to take credit for saving this person's life, but I think the message of minimalism and living more deliberately has helped him out. He said, "I have an incredible story, but also I have a lot of work to do. You two have given me a new outlook on life." And we get this all the time. We have people come to our events. We have people who will send us emails or contact us in person, however it may be. And I can tell you that the people that minimalism helps the most are the people who want to make a change, or in many cases need to make a change, right? And it has little to do with their socioeconomic status. It has little to do with their background. It has little to do with their geography. It has much more to do with their willingness to make some sort of changes in their life. And it's just a tool, by the way. It's not going, a hammer is not going to fix your house, right? You have to be willing to use that hammer to repair the things. And the same thing is true with minimalism. It's just a tool, and it's a tool for anyone who wants to live more deliberately. And so that's not my typical response. My typical response to any sort of criticism is, well, you can go back to the criticism episode. It's a bunch of crickets because I know better. But for this person who has an unpleasant experience in their life when their friends or whomever is criticizing them, well, yeah, that's fine. Minimalism is for rich white people or whatever. You know what? Who else that's really insulting to? It's really insulting to like the people in our documentary, like Leo or AJ or Christine or the dozens of other diverse people who aren't rich white males. It's really insulting to them because what you're saying is, you know what? Yeah, but your opinion doesn't count.
Yeah.
You're some sort of token person, and it's just offensive.
Yeah.
And so what I would say is that I'll say what Rob Bell often says about the critics here. Yeah, I'm not here to argue with people. I'm here to help some people hear the music.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really where I want to go with this is, yeah, there are going to be some critics, but I'm not doing this for them. I'm doing it to help some people hear the music. And so is it going to create an unpleasant experience for me? No, I'm not going to let it. It's part of it. It's uncomfortable sometimes.
Yeah. You've used the arena example. Who's the one that
Roosevelt, Teddy Roosevelt
really talked about that? Yeah. So he talked about how, well, the example was the people who are criticizing you are not in the arena, meaning they're not the gladiator in their fighting.
Right.
Like they can't talk to it because they have no idea what the fight is like anyway.
They've never experienced it.
Right. So, I mean, it's pointless. But I think another way to look at that example is, we're the gladiators in the arena. Yeah, we are. Look at this loincloth.
You've got the gladiator hair, man. And you're dipped in oil right now.
I had Sean rub me down before this podcast. No,
that's
man.
Good, man.
But we're there for the spectators in the arena.
Yeah.
So, someone criticizing that they're not there to watch the message they're not there to watch the fight anyway.
Yeah.
So like, if they're not even in the arena to observe,
Right.
like, why would I give them any clout at all?
Right.
I mean, they're like on the outside of the arena, you know, like with a protest sign or something. Like,
Right.
I mean, it's really odd. But yeah, I don't know how many times I can address this question without exploding, man, because it really does. I mean, like, every time I hear that question now, like, it wasn't so bad. Like, when we were on tour in 2014, we had that quite a few times.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But like, I don't know why over the last couple of years, the more and more I hear that question asked,
I can tell you why.
Or why?
I know why it's more frustrating, because you've seen it help so many people who are in despair. You over the years before, where you're like, yeah, I mean, you and I grew up poor, and you know from a firsthand experiential basis that minimalism would have helped us growing up when we were poor, right? It would have helped us better focus. It certainly would have helped us in the corporate world as well, refocus our time and attention and resources that we had. And it helps us now that we are minimalists, we're living more intentionally. But you've also, and so you had the firsthand experience, but you didn't have as much of the seeing dozens, hundreds, thousands of people who have experienced a better life, a more meaningful life, more purpose in their life, change in their life. You've seen it now. And so for you, you're like, if you could just put on these goggles and see what I've seen, you would realize how dumb your question is. Mm-hmm. And because it's like if a person who's colorblind comes to you and says, well, don't you think that seeing color is just for a certain type of person? You'd be like, well, no, I think it's for anyone who's able to experience that, and so I think that it makes you frustrated because you have seen people like Christopher there.
It's frustrating. It's a scarecrow argument, man. It's like
straw man.
Scarecrow, straw man.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, they're both made out of straw.
Man, if it was just me doing this podcast, it would
so good.
I don't know if people would understand me. Anyway, no, it's a straw man argument, and I'm just sick of it, man. Because like, at this point, it would be like a flat world society constantly pestering me about the world is flat.
Yeah.
Like, at this point, it's like, shut up.
Yeah, you just ignore it.
Yeah, it's like, just,
and I think
just stop. I don't care how, you could type me a 10,000. There have been articles, 5,000 words, 2,000, whatever, about how basically doesn't work for poor people. Uh-huh. And I've never seen an article written that wasn't some lame ass straw man argument.
Right. Yeah. No,
I'm just fed up with it.
I think that's a great analogy, man. Because so how do you deal with people that come up to you and say the world is flat? You kind of don't.
You just smile and nod and you go, okay, and you pat them on the head.
Yeah, I disagree with that.
Okay, have a nice day.
Yeah, and because you and I know, and honestly most people know as well. I mean, you have to be pretty obtuse to think that living more deliberately with the resources you have is not beneficial for anyone. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it's a good place to end with the unpleasant experiences, but we'd love to hear what you have to say. If you have any unpleasant experiences that you've turned into uncomfortable, growth-giving experiences in your life, give us a call. Let us know, 406-219-7839. We will air our favorite comments and tips and advice on the next episode. Let's move on, Ryan. I don't have any sort of paper in front of me, but do you have anything that's added value to your life recently?
Man, I'm trying to think of something local. Zootown Brew's got some awesome cartel in right now. It's a washed
from
El
Cartel?
Salvador. Yeah.
Really? Did you convince them to get Cartel?
No, I actually walked in there. They were like, you got to try Cartel. I'm like, they were like, well, it's funny because Grace there. God, yeah. I love everyone. God, that's like my favorite coffee shop in Missoula.
Right.
Actually, the people there, I don't know. Maybe I literally know every single person there by name.
Yeah. Zach, Grace, who else is there?
Mackenzie just started Michaela just started a couple weeks ago. She told me to call her macaroni and cheese. I was like, I may or may not forget your name. She's like, just remember macaroni and cheese and you can just call me that. I was like, okay. Let's see, Spencer.
Spencer owns a place.
Yeah. Jonah. I don't know if Jonah's still there or not. Anyway, regardless, they've got an awesome cartel, and they also have an Onyx. It's a Kenyan Onyx that's really tasty right now.
Oh, I love Onyx is based out of Arkansas. They're like Fayetteville, I think, or somewhere in the Ozarks. But Onyx is a great roaster. So you're recommending a local coffee shop?
Yeah, for our Missoula listeners who I haven't already
recommendation.
convinced to go to Zootown Brew. Well, no, you kind of put me on the spot
No,
there. Man. It takes, what our audience doesn't know is it takes me a lot to come up with a recommendation because I don't digest a million books and a million podcasts all the time. So it's harder for me to be like, oh yes, like, and then I always feel bad when I'm like, oh yeah, I bought this LED red light bulb. Here's a thing you need to add to your life. So like, there's a balance between like
totally
being able to recommend something and like maintain this lifestyle and like feel good about recommending something like when it truly adds value. But no,
I think that's important though. So the added value segment on this podcast are things that have added value to my life or your life, and it doesn't necessarily mean that we think it will add value to anyone else's life. If you don't like coffee, Ryan's recommendation is a bad recommendation. It won't add value to your life. If you like coffee, there's some great, every a couple of weeks it feels like we're talking about a different coffee roaster. The stuff that we talk about will probably add value to your life if you like coffee.
Yeah. Oh, you know what else is going on this weekend?
What's that?
Big Sky Film Festival.
Oh, nice.
I just went and saw this movie. Actually, I will recommend this movie. It's called, All the Rage. That's what it's called.
I haven't heard of it.
I really wish I would have taken you to it because it was specific to people's back problems. And it was funny because my chiropractor, he was like, you go to this is like a week or so ago, you going to the Big Sky Film Festival? And I'm like, yeah, maybe. Mariah's volunteering at it and like she's got a bunch of stuff going on. I'm like, yeah, I think we got a couple passes. Like I might go check something out. He's like, you got to go see All the Rage. And I didn't ask him what it was about. I was just like, oh, okay, thanks for the recommendation.
Is it a short or is it feature length?
Feature length. It was like 70 minutes, something like that.
Okay.
And like we started watching it and I'm like, oh, this is why my chiropractor recommended All the Rage.
Yeah.
But it's about this gentleman. His name is escaping me right now.
That's an awesome name, Escaping Me. Speaking of pickup artists.
But basically it all comes down to the mind and body synchronization. He doesn't like this doctor that the movie was kind of revolved around. I mean, the movie kind of jumped all over the place, but the idea was the pain that we have in our lives. There is a difference between like I break my arm is physically broken,
right?
But the pain that we experience afterward is directly linked to how we're treating ourselves and how our mind is. It's kind of woo-woo-y.
It sounds like John Sarnos' book.
I think that's who it was.
Okay.
Is it really like older gentleman? What was his book called?
Yeah. I forget.
Like back pain relief or something like that.
Yeah, something rather generic. Yeah, it's something I've read. I mean, my back pain has a lot more to do with just dysfunction, many years of dysfunction. But I agree with there is a link between our mind and our body. It's not standing in separate corners of the room.
Yeah, I gotta look this up and see if it is John Sarnos. That does sound familiar.
All right, while you're looking that up,
what do you got to
I'll
recommend?
give you, Aquilo, one of my favorite bands. They have released a bunch of EPs over the last few years, but this month they just released their first full-length album. And I think that everyone who does Album of the Year awards should just go ahead and put the award in escrow right now.
It is a great album, man. I will second that.
And so check out Aquilo. It's called Silhouettes. It's like atmospheric sort of, I don't even know how to explain it. It's British kind of pop, kind of singer-songwriter. It's just atmospheric. It's beautiful. Their voices are like instruments, and it's a great album. Silhouettes by Aquilo.
Yeah. I did just look it up, and it's John Sarno.
Okay. Yeah. So
it was a great movie, and it was just like
I've talked to so many people who have gotten immense value from his book, and I've tried it. And I've tried the exercises in it.
Did you read the book?
Yeah. And it didn't help me, but I don't discount the. Yes, you're right. There are some parts that are a bit woo-woo-y, but.
I think John Sarno stuff only works for rich white guys. That's what it is. And we're just white guys.
And you know what? I think that I wouldn't discount the book, and that's why I read it and practiced the exercises. I've gotten a lot more value. In fact, once I get to the other side of all this, my back has improved so significantly over the last year from where it was 2 years ago. I mean, day and night difference. I'm not all the way on the other side of fixing it yet, but I've implemented a lot. I'll talk about all the stuff that has helped me. The thing that's helped the most, two things: PRI, which is the Postural Restoration Institute. I have a physical therapist who helps out with that. But then the thing that's helped the most is Peter Goskew's book. It's called Pain Free. Also, there's the one before that was just called The Egoscue Method. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I've bought that book by the case and handed it out to people that have exercise. The exercise has helped me immensely. It got rid of my sciatica.
I thought you were going to say The Exorcist is what really.
yeah. They got the demons out of my back.
Get the demons out.
But that's helped out a lot. And then with my gut stuff, I've had a lot of issues. I'm repairing my gut. I'll talk to you about this off air, but I have another test coming up in 2 weeks, but that's going to determine whether or not I do a fecal transplant, which will be interesting to talk about. So I have something called C. diff, which kills something like 14,000 people a year in the United States. And we've been doing a lot of weeding of my gut, and it's come down a little bit, the amount of C. diff, but not significantly. And so the way to treat it, they found the most recent round of these clinical studies found that the fecal transplant is so much more effective than doing another round of antibiotics or something like that.
Right.
That they're in the middle. This rarely ever happens, but in the middle of the test or the what's it called, the double-blind placebo-controlled experiment. They in the middle of it, they stopped giving the people antibiotic and just gave them all the fecal transplant because it was so effectively curing C. diff that, I mean, we're talking, I think 5 years from now, maybe less, it will be one of the top treatments. And
wow.
It's already happened a lot in the UK, but it'll be one of the top treatments in the US as well. Hopefully it doesn't get to that. Hopefully this round of weeding has killed off enough C. diff that I'm moving in the right direction. I don't have to get to that, obviously. Yeah. But I've been working with Chris over at nourishbalancethrive.com, and he is a great counselor, and the doctors, the team over there have been really great. So I don't get paid for telling anyone about that. In fact, I pay him to help me. In fact, I was just talking to him this morning on a consultation, and they've really helped me with my gut and fatigue and different issues. I've had adrenal fatigue, my supplementation, getting back on the right probiotics, really great probiotics, tweaking my diet. I already had a great diet. It's pristine now. We've changed a few things in my diet that has really helped my gut health overall, just my overall health. So Chris over at nourishbalancethrive.com has helped out with that. So as soon as I feel like I've effectively healed myself, whether it's my gut and or my back, we'll do a whole episode about healing, which I think a lot of people get benefits from.
For sure.
All right.
Yeah, that movie, All the Rage, it was great. The only other thing I wanted to say is when I was watching that movie, it totally helped me understand how like an MRI doesn't really tell you anything. Because you were explaining to me how you can have MRI of one person where they've got a bulging disc and it's pushing on a nerve and they feel nothing.
Right.
But then you got someone else and they feel so much pain.
Yes.
And that movie actually helped me make sense of that.
Right.
Because it's like, how do we react to pain? Some people are using it as a crutch.
Right.
As an excuse to, I mean, there was this one gal who after the movie, she just like got up and was bawling and she was like, I never realized how I totally use my pain as a crutch.
Yes.
Oh, well, I'm not going to do that today. Oh yeah, my back's acting up today,
Right.
Like, so yeah, it was really, it was a really good movie for sure.
All right, well, let's move on to right here, right now. This is where we talk about what's going on in the lives of the minimalists. Ryan and I are hitting the road this year for the Less Is Now tour. We're going to give an in-depth talk about minimalism. Got a presentation there, but more important, we're going to do this podcast, a live version of the Minimalists podcast in front of live audiences, let you ask your questions, interact with us, and of course, there will be a lot of hugs exchanged. Those are obviously optional. They're also free and transferable, so hopefully you'll come grab one. We're coming to a bunch of cities. We already announced the Boston date, and that date is getting ready to sell out. We're going to announce a bunch of other dates really soon. You can find all the details and also sign up for our email newsletter to be the first to know about new cities that we announce over at the minimalists.com/tour. I'm really looking forward to that, Ryan. What else?
Me too, man.
What else is going on? Oh, reviews. We've had a bunch of people who have given us 5-star reviews recently. Just want to say thank you for that. Really appreciate it. We never do advertisements. We think advertisements suck. And so you're not going to hear advertisements on this podcast, but there are a couple ways that you can support the podcast. You can either donate over at theminimalists.com/donate. You can do a one-time contribution or a monthly contribution. Or if you can't afford that, totally understand. No obligation there. Would love to get a 5-star review from you on iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcasts. We'd really appreciate that. I think that's all I got right now, Ryan.
That's all I got too, man.
Maybe we have, Sean, some comments and tips from our listeners for this episode.
Hi, my name is Stefania. I'm calling from St. Paul, Minnesota. I'm calling with a suggestion for your clothing episode. I've been using these socks called Darn Tough. It's a company from Vermont. They guarantee their socks for life. I think all they sell is socks, actually. And while they are a little bit pricey, they do go on sale. And the thought of having socks that will last either my entire life or that will be replaced by the company feels really right, like it's right up my alley. I've had these socks for over a year now, and they look as good as new. I have had to return one pair, and the company had excellent customer service, so I highly recommend them.
Hey, Josh. Hey, Ryan. My name is Angelina Gomez. I live in Las Vegas, Nevada. This is in response to your podcast dealing with criticism. There's a quote that I found recently that I've been implementing into my life to really help me. It goes as follows. Treat everyone with politeness, even those who are rude to you, not because they are nice, but because you are.
Hi guys, my name's Jennifer. I'm calling from Houston, Texas, and I just had a recommendation regarding the clothing episode. A app called Poshmark. Whether you're buying or selling, it's a really great tool. It's mostly for women's clothes, but they have a lot of guys' clothes on there as well. I've sold so much of my clothing on there, and it's super streamlined and easy to use. They make it really simple, but also have been able to purchase a few quality used clothes for a really good price.
All right, y'all, that's it for today. If you have a question for the Minimalist, give us a call, 406-219-7839. And if you leave here with one message, we hope it's this. Love people and use things, because the opposite never works. Thanks for listening, y'all.
See you next time.
Every little thing you think that you need, every little thing you think that you need, every little thing that's just feeding your greed. Oh, I bet that you'd be fine without it. Every little thing that you gotta have, every little thing that you gotta have, you gotta reach for and you gotta grab. Oh, I bet that you'd be fine without it. So tear your eyes away, or tear